chart, which is such an April Fool's joke. Mercury goes retrograde at 27 degrees Aries. So, who wants to start us off with Mercury retrograde? We're already under the shadow. We're going to be in Mercury retrogrades through all the fire signs this year. Mercury's going to spend more time in fire than all of the other signs combined. My friend Gary, Caton, astrologer, kind of let me glimpse into that Mercury is going to be on fire through retrogrades this whole year. And so I feel like we're going to have to get used to a fiery Mercury, but a fiery retrograde Mercury. And we're starting us off now. So on the 1st, in about 4 days, it's going retrograde. So who wants to launch us off with a retrograde delineation? This is the chart of the moment for the retrograde, at least.
Yeah, I've got a feeling here about this Mercury retrograde at the moment that he's feeling a bit unsupervised because there's no sight to any of his rulers in his bound or decan. He can't see Mars, he can't see Saturn. So there's this, or Jupiter, or any of those usual rulers that would be looking at Mercury. And Mercury we know as like this messenger planet. He can go to places that the other planets can't go. He goes out of bounds, even the moon. He goes beyond those places. And there's kind of that sense of that happening where there's no sight from any of these rulers looking after him. So there's a sense that we may tune into things that we've not been aware of before here. When he goes retrograde, we're brought into things that we've maybe not looked at before, things that we've covered before, but we see in new and different ways. And I think that's coming through even more strongly here without the other planets. Their eyes are busy on other matters. So I really get this sense of things, if you're willing to take this time for reflection, we're always told all the RE words, reflect, revise, redo. But I think it's a really strong time if you really go into that reflection and maybe spend time in meditation and everything, that Mercury could have messages for you. Watch out for omens and symbols and things that are repeating for you because of this unsupervision. I don't know how that feels to you guys, but it just feels, usually there's some sort of planet that's got some sort of something to say. But I'm really getting that feel quite strongly. I don't know how you feel. If anybody else feels that as well.
Yeah,
actually, I think unsupervised is a really great word for it.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that, Mercury. Oh, sorry, Krista.
No. Go.
Mercury being psychopomp, he likes to travel between worlds, and I feel like this just gives a full opportunity to jump back and forth, play mind games, make you think ahead and then come back to it again. All those rewords, like you meant.
Yeah, it got my attention when you were talking about the unsupervision. So Mercury is in Aries. Aries is ruled by Mars. Mars is in the next door sign of Pisces. So in Hellenistic astrology, they can't see each other by traditional sight, right? But then I was thinking, well, Mars is in Pisces, and Pisces rules Jupiter by domicile, but it rules Venus by exaltation. And one of the reasons why Venus exalts in Pisces in kind of the archetypal way is Pisces holds like memory and longing, and it's like the keeper of memory. And we, when you think of grief, the reason that we grieve is because we have this love of the memory of the people that are no longer around. And so we grieve them because that same amount of love, we don't have a place to give it to them. So it kind of just floats around our bodies, trying to find a receptacle outside of us. And so that grief and that longing is there because of the memory. So Venus in Pisces likes to remember. It has kind of that looking back. It thinks back and it collects all of the memory. And a retrograde Mercury also is kind of a return to things. And so I just imagine, but like Mercury retrograde in Aries and Venus Venus in Pisces, but the Mars in Pisces also kind of like looking up at the moon, longing, and not really sure why they're upset or why they're remembering things, but it's because they can't see each other, because they're too close to each other, but then they're just, oceans apart. I don't know. It has this return to something that might feel a little bit hard to grasp, because it's so close to each other. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's just kind of like the vibe that's coming through me is like this, a little bit of a heartache, a little bit of wanting to find some sort of anchoring in grief and love, in the Pisces Aries charts or places in your chart. But there's this return to something or remembering of something. And Mars usually isn't like a pause and reflect sort of a thing, but in Pisces, maybe he's kind of forced to be. Does that make sense to anybody, or is that just word salad?
Yeah, totally. The other thing I noticed was we've got, check me if that's right, because I'm not great on these. Krista's the best at antishas, but is there an antisha between the North Node and Saturn? It's just a couple of degrees out, but that could speak to...
I don't know. Do you do antisha to points? I'm never sure if it's just planets or if it's points. Because I was looking at that too of how close are we to that antisha, because that's the one thing that Pisces and Aries can have with each other is that sharing of light, but just on the either side of that equinox point. So, but I'm not sure if you do antisha to nodes. I don't know. If you know in the chat, put it in there, because I'm unclear.
Yeah, because that would help, especially with that node being involved in the upcoming eclipse. It's kind of like a possible precursor if you can get into what's going on in Pisces and the Saturn there, that maybe there's something unseen and hidden at the moment, but Saturn and the North Node having a potential conversation about it already.
Yeah, I see in the chat, Enchanted Diana says it's going to be the last Mercury retrograde of my Mercury year. I read it as I'm very much mercurially done. Same. This is my last Mercury retrograde of my Mercury year, 8th house Mercury year. So, I like Mercury retrogrades. Knock on wood. Famous last words. But what's interesting is like, okay, well, Mercury slid through Aries because it's doing his job, and he goes all the way to 27 degrees and has to go back. So that's why he's spending so much time in Aries. He's not going to get out of Aries until May 15th. So the entire month of April, it's Mercury retrograde or under the shadow. So I just feel like that is the first layer, the dumpster fire kindling that we're going to experience for April, is that Mercury is retrograde in Aries. Like, you can just have that as like a calendar event for the entire time, because that's just always going to be there. And we start on the 1st, so it really does launch us off. But it doesn't have to be all bad. I mean, retrogrades aren't inherently malefic. They're just sometimes clumsy. But they give us that pause. Like, I like when a planet goes retrograde because it looks like a stitch. It kind of goes back, and it's like that pause to go back before we go forward. Janessa, what are your thoughts? Do you have any on this?
Yeah, I guess I've been thinking about it in terms of like a chance to pause and reflect on, because it's ruled by Mars in Aries, I think, or Mars is in Pisces, but the retrograde is ruled by Mars. So I think pausing and reflecting on like ways we can take action. Like for me, that's kind of what I already have kind of lined up for the month in terms of like my business or things I'm pursuing, is kind of like a chance to do a lot of that background work, laying the foundation for when it does go forward again, to be ready to jump in and take action. So, and reflecting on the ways that I do that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because like all the fire signs are enshrined to each other, so that trigon of the fire. So if you're like Scorpio rising like this chart, or if you're Pisces rising, you have, a fire as your second house of like how you like generate income. but then that trigon reaches up to the 10th house of career, and it also reaches down to the 6th house of like the day-to-day work, like what can you do day to day. And so those 3 houses really do speak to how do you work to generate income to create that legacy. And so you can look at that fire trigon wherever it is in your chart. It's like, okay, well, is it the 1st house of self and the 5th house of creativity and the 9th house of purpose? You know, like how does that, how is that retrograde kind of feeding into that connection of those areas of life? It's a good time to pause and strategize. You know, like Aries is a really good strategy sign. It's like, what can you do? And to make it kind of go back, it's like, I imagine if you had all these plans to go somewhere and it started to pour down rain, well, maybe you just have to sit inside and kind of renegotiate what your plan is, and maybe you'll, you know, do something that's a little different than what you expect. But we'll probably refer back to this